Can we already foresee the structures of future memory cultures today? Starting from this question, I would like to turn to the mediatized forms of the current culture of remembrance and highlight some abstract principles that their design follows. In alluding to the title of my contribution, it should be noted in advance that it is of course impossible to predict exactly how we will remember. However, profound changes in our knowledge culture are currently emerging as a result of mediatization processes which are currently having an impact on the design of memory cultures and on the structures of medial remembering, and will most likely do so in the near future as well. The answer to the initial question is therefore by no means speculative, but results from what remains, or let me specify it further, from the structures of how we deal with the past today and what we consider worth keeping and in what way. I have explained these in recent years in various, mostly longer essays or also in video essays. In the following I will limit myself to a very brief summary of these considerations, and I will mention only a few examples here. I will highlight three aspects. First, the focus on audiovisual media. Second, the problematic archive situation. Third, the logic of remediation and associated transformation of credibility criteria. The first aspect I would like to address is the focus on audiovisual media offerings. This is not a new phenomenon. In the examination of the Nazi era, the Holocaust and the Second World War, audiovisual offerings from cinema and televisions have repeatedly initiated an important paradigm that is consequently also relevant for the social discourse on these topics. From a documentary such as Nuit et Brouillard by Alain Resnais in the 1950s to the US television series Holocaust, the story of the family Weiss, to Schindler's List, numerous examples could be cited here that have brought forward a discourse with mass appeal and thus made an important contribution to the culture of remembrance. However, this trend is no longer limited to the traditional mass media but also applies to museums and memorial sites that have been able to celebrate record numbers of visitors thanks to audiovisual media and multimedia offerings such as the Jewish Museum in Berlin, the exhibition area of Yad Vashem, the Memorial de la Shoah in Paris, or also not without political controversy, the two new facilities of the European Center of Solidarność or the Museum of the World War II in Gdansk. In addition to the offers of formal education, i.e. offers from museums and memorial sites, from schools and university, there are more and more offers of wild, informal education via the generally accessible media. In the book series Medien der Geschichte, Media of History, Christian Bunnenberg and Niels Steffen published their book Geschichte auf YouTube, History on YouTube in 2019. Based on a Jim Hughes study from 2017, they come to the conclusion that teenagers and young adults not only hardly use print media anymore, but also hardly ever go to the movies or watch TV. Instead, audiovisual offerings on social media platforms. Not for entertainment, mind you, but as a source of information, are highly popular. They're right. For more than 60% of digital natives under 18, YouTube is a tried and tested means of regularly finding out about topics. And it is the second part of call for searches on the internet after Google or search engines. End of quotation. In the meantime, the year is 2023. This trend has clearly intensified. In addition to YouTube, Instagram and TikTok, as well as interactive multimedia websites and XR applications, are becoming increasingly popular. History and the teaching of history can therefore foreseeable be understood in the future as a form of engagement with audiovisual and new interactive media. This brings me to my second aspect, which at the same time formulates a weighty limitation. The problematic archive situation which I present here with a focus on The German situation. While there may not yet be any problems with accessibility in the case of newer popular feature films, since they are of course present in the current exploitation cycle, older works already raise the question of whether can still be viewed at all. Documentaries even have not been and are not collected and archived to the same extent as popular or prize-awarded feature films. Often, they can be found rather by chance in festival archives, private collections, archives of museums, or municipal cinemas, or sometimes in media centers of universities. In these cases, however, they are often not publicly catalogued, meaning that only a few people with special knowledge can find them. Until recently, there was not even a central finding aid to search for documentary films. Also well-known databases such as IMDb also list documentary films. They are by no means systematic. It was only in the context of a research project that we were able to launch the database Dokumentarfilmgeschichte, which has become the most important finding aid with around 50,000 entries on German language films. It has been open access since 2018 and now has over 2 million page views. I will explain the archive problem here with just one example. Depending on storage conditions, analog video material loses its structural integrity after about 25 years. The information on the videotapes loses data quality and eventually becomes unreadable. Particularly affected are videos shot between the 1960s and the 1990s by numerous independent filmmakers who were also involved in the political and civil society emancipation movements of the time, especially from the end of the 1960s. That is, in addition to the student movement, movements for the emancipation of women, for the recognition of gays and lesbians, against nuclear power, for better environmental protections, for civil rights, and so on. What is particularly absurd about these is that while the documentary film works of Germany's two great dictatorships in the 20th century, i.e. the film holdings of the Nazi era and the GDR, have in part been excellently and exemplarily processed, it is precisely the documentary film testimonies of the civic emancipatory awakening of the FRG, i.e. the democratic Germany, that are now particularly poorly cared for archivally and threaten to be the first to disappear. But this is only one example of many, since not only video material but also, to varying degrees, other film holdings are affected. The deteriorating archive situations lead to the fact that it becomes more and more difficult to use or assign important sources. At the same time, the focus on audiovisual media leads to an increased need to visualize the past in audiovisual form. This need can ultimately only be met by using wild material from informal contexts whose origins and transformations can hardly be determined precisely. In the course of the historical development of remediations, a movement from testimony to medial document to circumstantial evidence takes place. This transformation results from the temporal distance, i.e. from the gradual disappearance of witnesses and contemporary witnesses, as well as the material decay of the documents, or, to use Jan and Aleida Assmann's words, from the transition from a communicative to a cultural memory. This transition is inevitably linked to a more performative way of dealing with the material, which through rituals leads on the one hand to a certain mythologization, but also enables new artistic practices of transformation, mostly linked to a new media technology. But what principles do these transformation processes follow? In addition to artistic ambitions, the zeitgeist or the tastes of contemporaries, there still seems to be a cold, mechanical logic of remediation that has received little attention so far. This would be the third aspect I would like to address, the exponential increase of remediation possibilities through the multiplication of media. This effect results from the reciprocal cross-media, media convergent or transmedia remediation possibilities, i.e. from the fact that the medial representation of one medium becomes the content of another medium. The exponential growth is mainly due to the emergence of new media. The more media exist, the more possibilities of a media change, i.e. the more remediation possibilities arise. In the current mediatization of the Nazi era, this is reflected in a paradoxical development. Also, the events have long since passed and new medial testimonies are hardly being added. The number of medial products dealing with them is increasing exponentially. The reason for this is neither the mass appearance of new source material nor an increased social interest in the topic, but rather the momentum of a media transformation culture which increasingly remediates existing media testimonies, i.e. takes up media representations again, edits them and feeds them back into the media exploitation cycle in transformed form. What was once, for example, footage of the Allied armies becomes material in a documentary film such as Nuit et Brouillard, which in turn becomes part of the Eichmann trial, and it is recorded as a cinema screening in the courtroom and is in turn edited for film or is integrated into feature films. This also changes credibility criteria. Whereas in the past it was still possible to rely on the strong institutional credibilization of television, for example through editorial staff, television broadcasters, and cooperation with so-called experts, today credibility is more likely to be achieved through sufficient evidence of sources, corresponding links, and opportunities for participation and interaction. Remediations, media changes, the use of new media technologies, multimedia and interactive forms of presentation are therefore not only possible, but are even expected as part of the credibilization strategy. This is exactly what can be seen in recent projects that deal with a Nazi theme, such as the interactive project Uploading Holocaust, or the website The Liberation of the Dachau Memorial, or the IE-supported interviews with absent witnesses of the Shoah Foundation with New Dimension in Testimony, or the YouTube channel of the Anne Frank Houses, or an Instagram project like the Eva Stories. They seem to me to be only the first harbingers of a further development that uses audiovisual media as material, but constructs new memory cultural contexts in complex multimedia knowledge worlds. All these projects are characterized by clear principles which I would like to summarize once again here, and which in sum determine how we will remember in the future. First, what we will remember will depend on what the archives make available to us. There is a strong tendency towards audiovisual material which, however, requires precise attribution. Otherwise, it invites mythologization. Precisely because of the archival problem, principles of transparency and retraceability of an argument will become more important in order to assess credibility. Second, how we will remember will depend on the respective technological and, connected to this, also artistic possibilities, especially at a time when IE technologies are also beginning to imagine and dream. Precise reconstructions of the transformation history of materials are becoming increasingly important for a scientific approach to historical representations. Thank you for your attention.